Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with RokoM Michelle. And this week, we're going to talk about the power of vulnerability. And I know Brené Brown has written a lot, talked a lot about that. And so you're probably wondering, what the heck does that have to do with leadership? And so I want to start us off with a quote. And then we'll step in and start unpacking what that may look like, because the whole idea of vulnerability can be kind of scary. Here's the quote from Brené Brown. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And so if you think about innovation, creativity, and change, those are core, right, attributes or aspects of leadership to be successful in that. And so the other thing that comes to mind for me is I have to wonder is, and I'm going to ask this of you, Roko, is we can say that quote, but what is the definition in your mind of vulnerability?
Yeah, I think in a word, it's openness. So when I first graduated college and started working, my role models of leaders were the heroes of the day. They had all the knowledge, they had all the answers. They came in and solved all the problems. And as time went on, I realized that when a leader is that hero, they're the rate limiting step of, to your point, connections, innovation, creativity, because they're housing everything. They're a one-man show. And so in today's workforce and environment, if we want to manage through or thrive in a changing landscape, in a changing workforce and all of that, we have to step out of that traditional model of leadership and be open about, hey, as a leader, I don't have all the answers. I have fears too, but together our collective thinking can get us out of this or raise our level of performance or innovate around something that we're trying to move in our business. And so openness is the definition of vulnerability for me.
Yeah, I think about authenticity, transparency. The thing that comes to mind for me is when I think about vulnerability and all the stuff that you just described, leaders not having all the answers, being able to engage with your team, is trust. And so it's like, in order to, I'm going to say, feel comfortable with being vulnerable with your team, and maybe your team members being comfortable being vulnerable with each other, and you are in that group setting, there's got to be some level of trust. And so at some point, it feels almost like a chicken and egg, right? Which comes first?
Yeah.
And I think the scarier part from a leadership perspective is we need to role model, and what it is we expect. We need to create the condition for people to be able to step in that way. And it's I think it can be a scary thing as a leader to step into demonstrating and being vulnerable yourself when the condition may not exist to where there's trust among the team.
Yeah, what was coming to mind as you were talking, and my coach hat, came on strong. And it was like, thinking about, if I was coaching a leader in that moment, is about thinking about, what was the fear around being vulnerable? What's not being said about why they were resisting being vulnerable, right? And understanding that. And when you do that, then you can think about, oh, well, being vulnerable might not be so bad, and I could show up in a different way. And one of the most memorable things that I've had in a work environment was when a senior leader had been on the lean journey for several years, but just it wasn't taking traction. And I remember the lean coach kept saying, it starts with you. It starts with you, but she just wasn't wasn't embracing it, wasn't having anything to do with it. But the pivotal moment was when she stood up in front of 150 of her leaders and physicians and said, you know, for the last 2 years, I haven't believed in it. And she was transparent about where she was in her own journey to think about efficiencies and effectiveness using the lean methodology, the Toyota methodologies around process improvement. It was at that moment when she was open and transparent with her team about her journey and where she was with now, making the commitment to try something new in how she leads, in her own behaviors around problem solving, that she built trust. So like you said, the chicken and the egg, but it was at that moment that she built real connection with her team because they were all feeling it too. But just calling the elephant out in the room, and you know, they were able to laugh about it, they were able to move past it, and now that team is such a high performing team and really digging into tough problems and addressing them. But it was that pivotal moment of her being vulnerable with her team that shifted it.
Well, and so 50 zillion things in my brain right now, right? So it's just not a surprise for anyone who knows me. But some of the stuff that really stands out for me when you talk about that is, as a leader, you know, and coaching leaders and stuff too, what is it that we're telling the team, not necessarily by what we're saying, but by what we're doing, right? And so when you talk about that leader before, that they were heroes, right? Do you want to be a leader that you set this impossible standard, okay, that you have to have all the answers, that you're the hero, you've got to swoop in and do whatever, to where who's going to want to step in and try to fill those shoes, right? And the other part of it is you disengage people, because if you're doing what you're talking about, the example that you did, people can see that you're not congruent, that you're not being authentic, right? I'm just going through the motions. And that may not have been the intention, right? Because some people say fake it till you make it. There's two sides to that, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, so I'm going to step in and go, I'm not all there yet. Or as a leader saying, you know, when we're faced with a problem, a situation, whatever it is, I don't have the answer. But what I do know with certainty is that we're all going to be able to come together and solve for it.
That's right.
So the vulnerability piece is powerful, because in there is truth. And the truth is the thing, to your point, that's going to establish and allow trust to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. You had shared a quote with me offline when we were talking about doing this podcast, and it was something to the effect of having the courage to be seen.
To show up and be seen.
Yeah. And what you just described to me is that courage to be seen. And again, it goes back to what are we afraid of in that moment of being open, being vulnerable. And when we can call that out, then we're able to address that fear and not let it prevent us from being open and making those connections.
There's a couple things that come to mind, right? Because I know when COVID hit and all the change and all the situations, people didn't have the answers. People didn't know what we needed to do, and things are rapidly changing every day, right? But one of the important aspects of leadership is to, even though you may not have the answers, that you don't paint a picture of doom.
Right.
That you instill hope in people, right? That
yes.
I don't know the path forward. We're going to figure this out together, but I know with certainty that we're going to solve for this and we're going to come together. And so the other thing that comes to mind for me is another video that we share with leaders, the greatness video, right? It's the story of David Marquette. He was the nuke sub commander who, you know, had trained for almost 2 years on this one sub. And lo and behold, he got moved to another sub and in 2 weeks to bring himself up to speed. talk
Not
about
just any sub,
vulnerability.
the worst sub in the fleet,
Yeah,
right?
the
The worst sub in the Navy.
But it was a sub that he didn't know how to run. And so the whole thing of hero, you talk about hero, the commander was they called all the shots, all of them. And so for him to be vulnerable, to basically say, guys, if we do how we've always done, we will cease to exist. I mean, you know, I need to depend on you and your knowledge and what you have.
Yeah.
So I think there's so many upsides to, and I'm going to call it humanness, to show up with your humanness as a leader, because then you allow other people to do the same.
Yeah. I just want to pause for a second and take that all in, because that was beautiful, Michelle. That was really beautiful.
Thanks, Roko.
Yeah, but it's so true. At the end of the day, it's about, you know, again, I keep calling it openness, but I love that term that you just used, humanness, right? We're not these robots of perfection. We do make mistakes. We don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And just to be okay with that, mm-hmm. and be open about it. It brings life to interactions with others, right? Because it allows them to be the same, mm-hmm. you know, and you could, as we talked about in our previous podcast, right? About problems being opportunities. Mm-hmm. It allows us to grow, and it allows us to see other things and move towards some better place.
Thank you. So what, out of all that, what's something that we want people to walk away with?
Be open, address your fears, really think about what is it that's driving me, preventing me from being open, and how might I then move forward. But try it, just try being open and see what the results are.
It's so funny you said fear, because what came to mind for me is face your fears and do it anyway, right?
Yes.
And the vulnerability piece is, it's not a weakness. It takes courage, and the rewards are so worth it. Mm-hmm. So this has been Leadership Soundbites. We appreciate you joining us for the power of vulnerability in this week's discussion. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, let us know what topics appeal to you, and thanks for watching. Yes.